And they sent Trump into a complete imbroglio, one of the worst military defeats, maybe the worst military defeat the United States has suffered. I say period, maybe since like the Civil War, which was just a defeat for the South and a sort of spiritual defeat for the American public because so many Americans killed each other. I left out Vietnam because the economic damage of Vietnam was contained. This was a defeat for U.S. empire that the U.S. will never recover from and will obliterate or will ultimately lead to the erosion of the power of the petrodollar. The Strait of Hormuz is still not open. The three marks helped lead Donald Trump into this, and now they stand exposed. And the sort of MAGA influencers who exist out of their loyalty to Trump and are just there to put forward whatever message Donald Trump wants them to put forward. There's actually a gap between the Israel firsters and the sort of MAGA loyalist paid influencers right now. You can see it with Mark Levin attacking Trump and attacking everyone. He's even attacking Israeli opposition figures, like a Jewish American is being more Israeli than Yair Lapid. They look crazy. And what they say doesn't make sense to the American public. Like you're going to see reflected in these comments that the commenters are going to say that what I'm saying makes a lot more sense than what Mark Dubowitz was saying last week. I watched that interview you had with him, and he seemed like he was in full panic mode. Nothing was adding up because his entire vision of what was going to happen in Iran and everything that he and the Foundation for the Destruction of Democracies, his Israeli cutout think tank in Washington, gave to Trump, the blueprint they put forward for this war, it completely failed because it represented Zionist logic. So, why does one, Jewish commentator make more sense than the other Jewish commentator? I'm not a Zionist. That's why the commenters are going to be saying this actually reflects the reality that I live in more than this other guy who's just trying to spin to get Trump back into the war. And here's another problem that Zionists face right now. People just don't want to see more killing. They don't want to see another Minab school strike. 168 people killed, teachers, over 130 schoolgirls on the first day of the war. Zionists had no problem with that. And Pete Hegseth had no problem with that. That was horrifying to everyone. And, they killed female volleyball players in Lamerd, Iran on that same day, testing a new missile for Lockheed Martin. What's happening right now in Lebanon? 4 Israeli soldiers were killed yesterday. And how did Israel retaliate? Over 150 airstrikes, killing 48 people and wounding 96, according to Lebanese Ministry of Health statistics right now. That's how they respond. People can't take this anymore, but Zionists want more of it. They're pushing Trump for more of it, and they're in full panic mode that they won't have this. It's like they're addicted to killing. It's like they see force and bombing apartment buildings as a goal in itself. Even Trump has said Netanyahu would get on the phone with me every day and tell me which apartment buildings to bring down, and I found this a little bit strange. So they stand exposed right now, and the United States public is responding positively to the rhetoric of J.D. Vance. And just one other point, I think if this war had succeeded, obviously we wouldn't be hearing this rhetoric from Vance. Vance would be completely diminished because he was considered one of the restrainers, and Marco Rubio would be out there celebrating Israel. He'd be joining in with this, festival of Israeli hegemony and demanding more killing. Let's send the troops into Tehran. I don't know what they'd be doing right now if this war had somehow succeeded. It was a regime change war, but it failed. And it failed because we have to acknowledge this. Like, it's not that the United States establishment naturally opposes these wars. They're just looking at the failure and the economic consequences and saying Zionist logic doesn't correspond with ours. But we have to acknowledge why it failed. It failed because of the wisdom of figures like Hassan Tehrani Moghadam and Ali Hajizadeh, who are former IRGC generals who basically designed Iran's strategy for years. They were preparing for this. Both are dead. Moghadam was killed in 2013 while testing a new ballistic missile, and Hajizadeh was killed during the 12-day war. I think on the first day he was assassinated What did they do? Moghadam designed Iran's ballistic missile program. I got a chance to take a look at it a month before the 12-day war last year at the Iran's Aerospace Expo Park outside Tehran. And they show the entire evolution of this ballistic missile program, which is completely legal under international law. They're allowed to do it. It is essential to Iran's deterrence. But they weren't going to be able to get the parts for a sophisticated aircraft the way Israel does. So this is their substitute for an air force. And it has worked. It gave them the ability to basically remove U.S. bases from the region. I think many of the U.S. bases in the Gulf states will not come back. The ballistic missiles also pried the Gulf leadership away from this oil protection racket where they would basically pay to have U.S. bases there to protect their infrastructure. Now they realize there is no protection and they have to have normal relations with their neighbor, Iran. Hajizadeh designed the Operation True Promise responses to Israeli terrorism and aggression, which ultimately became a response to U.S.-Israeli aggression. And these, you could see the progression from True Promise 1 to 3 and 4, how much more sophisticated the targeting became, how much better the coordination between drones and ballistic missiles became, the pacing of the ballistic missiles, how much more clever it was. And then the designing of the missile cities. These were very controversial in Iran. And you had like Iran International and a lot of these Israeli or Saudi or CIA-backed outlets that are designed to kind of promote regime change in Iran. They would always point to the missile cities as this waste of money, that the IRGC was wasting money that could have been used on the Iranian public, or like them giving money to their allies in Hezbollah. The missile cities proved to be durable and resilient. I mean, there was that one smaller missile city in Yazd that just kept getting hammered day after day by US and Israeli bombs, and it kept launching. The launches kept coming. So the missile cities protected the firing capacity. And then the investment in just a cheap Shahid drone program, which was so effective that the US reverse engineered the Shahid drone into the Lucas drone. And then finally, the willingness, the ability, and also the small fast boats. We kept hearing, oh, operational success. The US has destroyed Iran's Navy. And Trump was being told this lie again and again. The Navy's been destroyed. Well, then why were they able to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed? Because the Navy wasn't destroyed. There were naval bases around the Strait of Hormuz that were fortified, kind of like the missile cities, which would allow for launching of drones and these small fast boats. So more wisdom from the IRGC, which allowed the Strait of Hormuz to be closed. And we're still at a point where Iran has more cards to lay on the table. Bab el-Mandeb to the Red Sea could still be closed by Iran and its allies in Yemen. So this is reality, okay? This is the military reality. The US and Israel lost. This isn't the Gulf War anymore, where smart bombs and the F-15s are going to be able to just demolish some worn out post-colonial Arab Ba'athist army that's armed by the Soviet Union. This is a more sophisticated beast you're talking about that has mastered asymmetrical warfare. And there's nothing that can be done about that reality. If US force cannot triumph over that reality, then Zionist logic cannot be imposed and it will be discredited. So we have to acknowledge the military reality along with the political one.
So how does the regional reality look like now? I made a post a few weeks ago now that for regional peace to exist, Iran has to recognize Israel's right to exist, and Israel has to stop their foreign policy approach to regime change in Iran. Both have to change their approach to one another. But my question is broader than that. What about Hezbollah? I don't like Hezbollah. I think we've had a discussion before. Yeah, but But I've agreed. I was born there. But I've agreed. I understand reality. Now my position is Hezbollah will be there to stay. I think as long as Mujtaba Khamenei wants Hezbollah to remain, it will remain. I don't think a military solution is the right solution. It has to be diplomatic. But what happens to Hezbollah? What happens in Syria? What happens to the Gulf? Where there's talks about an alliance between Turkey, Qatar, Saudi, Egypt, Pakistan and maybe even Iran? What does the UAE do? The UAE has already improved relations again with Iran. There's been multiple visits. So how does the region look like post this war?
You said that Iran has to recognize Israel's right to exist, and I think that's a key point. I mean, a right to exist is what? Because the Palestine Liberation Organization under Yasser Arafat in 1988 recognized Israel's right to exist. Did you know that? What does that mean? Right to exist as what?
I'll just clarify it very quickly. I know that's kind of a vague term that people throw around. Tucker did a great job, questioning what that term even means. I think it's I'll rephrase it to Iran has to change their approach to Israel, stop talking about wiping out the Israeli state. They can disagree with Israeli foreign policy. They can clash when it comes to Palestinian issues, Hezbollah. But I think there has to be improved relations for the sake of Lebanon, for the sake of Syria, for the sake of Yemen. But then it comes down to the Palestine issue, which I have no idea how we can solve that. So that could be the core issue. And without solving that, everything else won't be solved either. So that's I'm countering my own point.
Okay, well, this speaks to the point that I've been making throughout this entire conversation. What does Israel's right to exist mean, and what does Iran have to accept? I think Iran would accept an Israel that would not be aggressive. I think Iran would accept an Israel that went along with the Arab peace initiative of 2002 put forward by, I think, King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. And it was introduced through Thomas Friedman's column at the New York Times, not a particularly radical proposal for a Palestinian state. That's what Saudi Arabia still demands as a condition of normalization. They can't have it. Nobody can have that. Palestinians certainly can't have that. Why not? Zionist logic. We have to interrogate Zionism to understand one of the central crises of humanity today, which is that there's this tiny little nation that exists outside the realm of international law, normal international relations, and basic human decency and morality, because it is an officially ethno-supremacist state, which must be, in order to maintain its national identity, a so-called Jewish state, although it can't exactly define what Jewish is. Feels like Mike Huckabee, this Christian evangelical, gets treated like a better Jew than I would by the Israeli Interior Ministry that might not even let me in. I don't even know if that guy had a bris. Definitely didn't have a bar mitzvah, but he had a meeting with Israeli spy master Jonathan Pollard.
Yeah.
So what that means that Israel has to violently demographically engineer this reality by maintaining itself as a borderless colonialist entity that is constantly expanding settlements to establish Lebensraum, and it's moving into Syria, into the Golan. It has now established a long-term presence in southern Lebanon, and it does have expansionist intentions there. It is annexing parts of the West Bank de facto through settler terror and military presence. And Netanyahu has boasted that he has taken 60% of the Gaza Strip, which is now just mostly destroyed and is effectively a death camp, and that he will take more and move to 70%. That corresponds directly with Netanyahu's own expression of Zionist logic, in which Israel cannot exist as a Jewish state unless there are 70% Jews and 30% non-Jews, i.e. indigenous Palestinians, on any piece of land. And if Palestinians maintain more of their population on that land, then it cannot be part of the Jewish state. That's a mandate for ethnic cleansing, and it corresponds directly with what Israel is doing with the yellow line in the Gaza Strip. So this is why no one can recognize Israel in the region, and why Israel is in this permanent state of war, because of the anachronistic character of how it defines itself as a state. It cannot be a state of all its citizens or all its people. And so that's also why you have Hezbollah. You think, what Hezbollah? Like they're like this group of Shia ideologues who exist to just destroy Israel and fight Israel. And they just, no. Why was Israel in Lebanon in the 1980s? Why did it invade Lebanon? It was supposedly to push back not Hezbollah, not the Shia population, but the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, who were composed of refugees in Lebanon who had been pushed out of what was Palestine from 1948 on. There was a massive wave of refugees in 1967 as well, in order to establish the so-called Jewish state. There wouldn't have been refugees in Lebanon. Lebanon wouldn't be in this crisis had Israel not been established along the guidelines of Zionism and ethno-supremacism. So Israel goes in, brings its military into Lebanon, and they initially were told that the Shia population would support them and throw candy at them, but they couldn't resist abusing the Shia population in the south and abusing the Lebanese population in general as they quickly marched to Beirut, caused massive war crimes, formed alliances with the most odious elements, the Lebanese Phalange, which carried out the Sabra and Shatila massacre with Israeli guidance, and so on. So Hezbollah was created to defend Lebanon's population, and particularly the Shia population of the south, against this force that actually aimed to essentially occupy Lebanon, either by proxy through the South Lebanese army or through the Lebanese Phalange, which are, the Lebanese forces today remain an ally of Israel, and to push that population out. So Hezbollah exists to defend Lebanon against this aggressive force. Hezbollah would not have existed if Israel had not established itself as an exclusively Jewish state. So that's my point, is Hezbollah is a reflection of the toxic effect of Zionist logic on the region. And you say, oh, well, what can we do about them? You don't like them. There's a reality there, that a political reality, Mario, that you have to recognize, which is that Hezbollah is the largest parliamentary faction in Lebanon, and that this war that Israel's waging is also an excuse for Joseph Aoun and Samir Jaja and all of these corrupt forces that have no clear mandate to rule to actually remove the largest parliamentary faction, their enemy, by proxy through Israeli force, because they can't do it by politics alone. They can't do it with the consent of the Lebanese public. And in order to do that, what else do they have to do? Something that is absolutely criminal, that is not being sufficiently condemned, which is the ethnic cleansing of the Shia population of Lebanese citizens in the south. They're being ethnically cleansed. It's a war on the Shia community, because Hezbollah can't be defeated on the battlefield or at the ballot box.